Okay, everyone, I'm going to get started. My name is Blair Dorr, and I work for Headed2. Headed2 is the company that builds a number of Career Explorer and CareerZone platforms across the country. Today, actually, we'll be showing you a little bit from a number of these: Pennsylvania Career Zone, the California Career Zone, a little bit of the Nevada Career Explorer, but the most important thing for everyone to note is the main features of each of these systems are very much the same. So whether I'm demoing in our Career Explorer demo site, which is what you see on the screen now, or in one of the others, there's going to be a lot of consistency. We wanted to make sure that we were very inclusive on this call, given everything that's going on. We want to make sure that we got as many people on this call and able to see what we're showing as possible. If you have questions, please post them to the Q&A. We'll try to get to them at the end of the call. But because of the number of attendees, we won't be fielding questions as we go today. So let's begin with where we are today. I know a number of you are dealing with having students now working from home. That's certainly the case for us here in California. My kids are home today and beginning their lessons online. And so our hope actually is for many of you, these systems will be very helpful to you as you navigate this COVID outbreak. So again, this is something that's always here for you, but particularly relevant potentially right now for many of you. There are a number of free features that you'll see in these systems, free to use for the student, free to use for you as an educator. There are also features that are available for upgrade, and I'll be sure to kind of point to those. But the majority of what we're going to talk about today is about building lessons. And lessons are something you can create in the Career Zone and Career Explorer for free. So that's something that you as an educator can do without signing up for an upgrade. So that's one of the first kind of important things to point out. But let me showcase a couple of the systems that we have operating for us. So you can see what I was alluding to before. We have the California Career Zone, the Pennsylvania Career Zone, Nevada Career Explorer, and that's just a few of them. And you can see the interface is very similar as you go in. Now, using the California Career Zone as an example, when you arrive at the URL, cacareerzone.org, before you've signed in, it's going to encourage you to create a free account. And that's really important not just for you as an educator, important for your students as well. Having an account allows the system to remember the activities that you've done in the system. And it will help the system also make smarter recommendations to you about things you might be able to do next. It's also the way ultimately that as a teacher, if you're going to run reports and see what your students have done, this is the way it works. So what you're going to want to do, the very first step, is when you go to one of your URLs, whether it's the cacareerzone.org or pacareerzone.org, you're going to want to make sure that your students and you as an educator get started with a free account and register for an account. Now that's part one. Part two is that as an educator, you'll be given the opportunity to create a free educator account. And that educator account allows you to manage up to 50 students. And we're going to show you a little bit about how that works, but you're going to definitely want to sign up for the educator account because that's going to allow you to see the activities your students are doing in the system, to message your students within the system, and of course, with the main focus of today's call, to assign them lessons and review their progress in those lessons. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be covering. Now, the way this works is you as an educator, when you create an account, are going to see an educator code. You can see it up here in my management toolbar. It says EWNSPZ. That's my educator code that's unique to me in this demo, right? Now, my students are going to see a similar blue box when they create an account, only for them, this is going to be empty and they're going to be encouraged to put in an educator code. And that's where they would enter your educator code and then they'd come under your management. So I'll show you what that looks like in a bit, but I wanted you to be aware that that's what the educator code is. It is really the mechanism for you to bring students under management. And that's obviously a really critical part to what you're all going to be doing. Now, when you create this free educator account, this is what a little bit of what your homepage is going to look like. There's a few features here that you see that are part of the upgrade, but for the most part, this is what you're going to get. You're going to see the main avenues into the system, from discover possibilities to explore pathways to the summary report. The thing I want to direct your attention to, though, is for many of you, when you log in, you'll also see an opportunity to do a professional development course. And that's when you have a free educator account, you'll be able to learn about using the system in depth. I'm going to cover a lot of it today. So if you're attending this call or watching this call as a recording, then you should think that you pretty much have your bases covered, but still it'll be helpful for you potentially to take a look at the professional development. Okay, so let's jump into some of the main features of the system and how this all works for students. The Career Zone and Career Explorer were designed really as a way for students to begin to understand themselves, and via that self-understanding begin to develop career plans. And we start with that in mind with Discover Possibilities and the idea of self-assessment. So what you see here are a number of the self-assessments that are available inside our systems. Everything from our budgeting tools to interest profiler to the quick assessment, work importance profiler, skills profiler, and up the ladder. We are in this call today going to cover the top two, Budget Your Life and the Interest Profiler, and show you a little bit about how that works. And give you an idea of what the other assessments are too, but we're going to go more in depth on those a little bit later today when we include them in a lesson. But what you should know is when you're browsing the system, this is the place you're going to want to start. This is the place where you're going to want to jump in, go into Budget Your Life, try to do the lifestyle tool, go to the interest profiler, for example, do the interest exercise yourself before you assign it to students, because that'll give you an idea of how that works and how to make the most of it. Okay, so that's where your self-assessments are. Under the middle bucket, Explore Pathways, you'll see the ability to explore. These are the 16 nationally recognized career clusters. In California, we actually have the California industry sectors. But if I open up one of these, what you'll see is sort of a high-level view of an industry. And in turn, when we look at that industry, what are the annual openings, the recent graduates, the average wage? We get some of that information kind of at a glance. And we're also able to look in depth at the highest paying, fastest growing, and most employed. Okay, so when you're thinking about lessons and you're thinking about activities that you might have the students do, all of these are jumping off points. All of these are places where you might consider having a student, for instance, go into one or more cluster or industry sector and start to look at the annual openings and recent graduates and write a journal potentially about what does that tell you, or which of the occupations that you saw and fastest growing most surprised you, and tell us a little bit about it. So there are a lot of different things that you can do with your lessons, but the way to be creative is to know the system a little bit and just to make sure that you're in there and taking a look. I'm going to use this health science cluster as just an example to show you a little bit more about our listings and things you can do with them. An example here, as we see, is highest paying. So we're seeing some high paying position jobs, but we can also look at fastest growing and most employed. And the reason we might want to do that is because you see here under preparation, we have a job zone listed. The job zone comes from the Department of Labor, and it suggests the amount of preparation that's required to do a certain occupation. So job zone 3 is medium preparation, and then we include a description when you hover over. It says most occupations in this zone require training in vocational schools related on the job experience or an associate's degree. And as you scroll down and hover over each one, you learn more about how much preparation is required. Now, you're going to encounter a number of students who maybe have heard that, say, being a surgeon pays a lot of money, but what they may not recognize is how much preparation is required to become a surgeon. And that's where they might want to look at some of the fastest growing jobs or most employed and see that, hey, within the health science cluster, there may be other occupations that are a better fit for me that would require less educational preparation to achieve that. Okay, so those are just some of the things that we can do within the sectors and within the pathways. We also, from this page, have the ability to go in depth within colleges and explore colleges in our area. We can select the state and take a look at the colleges in that state. And what you'll notice is, in addition to having an amazing number of occupation profiles in the system, we also have profiles for colleges and different opportunities, certifications, et cetera, that give students in-depth information and knowledge about the educational pathways they might be taking to achieve the careers thereafter. One of the really cool things about CareerZone and CareerExplorer, and what's really important to us as a team, is that we kind of slip in financial literacy everywhere and anywhere we can. And so this is one example. As we look at the college profile, you'll see here a button that says, what will it cost me? And if I click on that, we're able to see our potential earnings from, say, an occupation that we most recently liked versus the educational costs, including interest rate on a potential loan, et cetera. And then this matches up and tells us in the end, are we going to be left with a net gain or net loss against our expenses, which we developed in a budget, which I'll show you later on. So just a kind of little preview or peek at one of the ways in which we're sneaking financial literacy into the system everywhere we can, because we know that a lot has to go into this decision about post-secondary educational steps. And the financial considerations are a very big one that we want students to always kind of have in the back of their minds as they're thinking about these things. The summary report ultimately is going to summarize everything that the student or you as an individual have done inside the system. What you should know as their educator or manager is that you're going to be able to see their summary report, and I'll show you how you do that in a little bit. But you'll have access, obviously, to your own summary report, but you'll also have access to all the students that you have under management. Okay, so that's kind of a brief overview of the system, but we are going to go more in depth. But let's kind of go to the topic of today's call, which is about lessons and lesson creation. So what you're probably going to find yourself using the most when you log into our systems is this management toolbar. For one thing, this is where you're going to grab your educator code, but it's also where you're going to click Manage Users to see the students that you have under management. So these are 26 fictional students that I have underneath this fictional educator. And so we see all the students here, and we also have the ability to manage the lessons that I have access to in the system. You're seeing on the screen right now a couple of prompts. We do this throughout CareerZone and CareerExplorer. If it's the first time you're using a feature, you're going to get a little bit of an on-screen tutorial on how to use it. So this is my lessons and assignments page. You'll see that since I'm right now inside the upgraded version of the CareerExplorer, I do have access to some pre-made lessons. If you were to log into this with a free educator account, you'd see a little lock and you wouldn't be able to open up these lessons and assign them. Don't worry about these too much. They can be very helpful, but this does not prevent you from creating a lesson, which is what you're going to be able to do here by clicking this button. And we're going to go, like I said, in depth in showing you that. But before we do that, let's go back to Manage Users and give you an idea a little more about what's going on this page. So for one thing, I've got all my students listed. And if I want to actually get an idea of what one of those students, like Jacqueline, has done in the system, I can click on the Actions button beside her name, and I can click View Profile Report. And when I click the View Profile Report, I get every bit of information I'd possibly want about what she's done in the system, from the occupation she's looked at to the budget she's created. Everything she's done is going to be captured inside of her profile report. Now, if I'm a subscriber, we have, and that's to anything from an individual educator's premium educator account, which I'll explain, or school-wide or district-wide, then you have access to files as well. Students have unlimited file management within the upgrade of the system, and you'd have the ability to manage that student's files from their individual profile too. Now, let's say, for instance, I wanted to message Jacqueline and just tell her to complete something that I noticed she hadn't yet completed. I might pull up her name here. Now I've just got her listed, and it says for the one user below, let's send a message. And I might write her, please complete your budget. Thank you. All right, and so this is just obviously for the purposes of demonstration, I send this message, and now Jacqueline is going to get that message when she logs in to the system. All right. We might also want to assign her a lesson from this page, and that's something we'll be able to do simply by clicking assign a lesson, or I can run reports. Now, I'm going to close out Jacqueline and get back to the 26 users. Now I've got my whole class. Say I have this week, I wanted all my students to complete a lesson or complete an activity in the system. Anything that you do here is going to be through the run a report button here. I click run a report and I click dashboard report. And what you're going to see here is a list of all my students, and each one of these little acronyms at the top represents a different activity in the system. If you hover over it, you see what activity it is. The green dot tells you that they've completed the activity, whereas the hash mark tells you that the activity is not yet started. So I can see at a glance who's done what, who's completed what I assigned, etc., and that's via the dashboard report. There is a more in-depth report about the lessons themselves. We're going to get to that after we assign and create and assign a lesson. So just hold on there, and we'll definitely come to that. A couple more points on users and groups, what you see here. Our subscribers are able to bulk upload users, and that makes it a little easier to get a bunch of students in there. But like I said, if you're not a subscriber and you're just using the free educator account, the way your students will come under management and show up on this list is by entering your unique educator code, and then they'll come onto this list and you'll be able to view them, and you can manage up to 50 of them. Okay. All right, let's continue. So let's imagine for a moment that we're looking to the weeks ahead, and we've decided that, all right, we're going to use the CareerZone and CareerExplorer, and we want to create our own lesson to assign to the students that we have under management. And that's really the focus of today's conversation. So I'm going to click on lessons, and I'm going to click create a lesson. And for the purposes of our webinar, we're going to call this webinar introduction or introductory lesson. All right, and we're going to note the grades that we could do this in. We're going to say it's to start as early as 7th grade, and it could go as high as 12th grade. And if I'm a subscriber, I have the option to share this with educators in my school. I click create lesson, and now I'm into sort of the foundation of the lesson. For one thing, the yellow box is a description of the lesson for myself as an educator, for other educators. Think of this as kind of the crib notes on what you're trying to do with the lesson. So it's an educator description. In this lesson, we are trying to introduce the CareerZone and CareerExplorer to students. All right, so I'll just write a very short introduction, but just we've seen this is where you're going to probably put a lot of information. If you're in Pennsylvania, for instance, and you know that you have to be aligned to the CEW standards to generate evidence, this is where you might actually note the standard that you're aligning to with your particular lesson. So that's one of the ways we see it used. If you're in California and you're looking at an LCAP, and you're trying to align to objective of the LCAP, this is where you might allude to that. So this is the place where it's kind of where educators can speak to other educators and at least put the reasoning and rationale behind why you're doing what you're doing. I click update lesson, and now I'm into the introduction and instructions. Now this is more for the student. This is where when I click this, I am now writing to my kids, and I'm telling them, all right, here's what I want you to do in this lesson. Self-assessment is a great way to figure out who you are and where you are going. All right. So, and then I would continue on with a more in-depth description that tells them that in this lesson, I'm going to have you do 2 self-assessments, the interest profiler and the budget tool. and here's why I think they're important. Here's here's what to watch out for, etc. I might include that all in this introduction and instructions. I click update lesson, and here we go. I've got my instructions are set for the student at a high level for the whole lesson. Next, we get into tasks. All right, so I click tasks, I click new task, and you'll see at the top here, I've got a number of options. I can ask students to create a text reflection. I could ask them to do the interest profiler, the work importance profiler, etc. And if you're an upgrader, you're going to be able to do things like surveys or files, or have the students actually submit outside work. If they were, say, creating a PowerPoint, you wanted them to upload a PowerPoint, you could do that if you're part of the upgrade. All right, but if you're using the free site, what you're probably going to rely most on is including some of these baseline activities and using text and reflection. Let's start with the interest profiler. I'm going to call this the interest profiler. And, we'll write a short description of, please do the 30-question interest profiler. All right, and again, we could write a lot more, but for the sake of the webinar and for the sake of brevity, I'm just writing in one-sentence descriptions here. I click, and I'll also say required to be performed in the current program year. Now, let me just point out what that checkbox means. Many of you have used this in the past, and many students have used this in the past. So if the student, completed an interest profiler 2 years ago, we don't necessarily want that to count as them having completed the interest profiler. We want them to do it again. We want them to kind of know where they stand today, this academic year, with their particular interests. So that's why we'd want to check that particular box. I click Save Tasks, and now I've got one task added to my lesson. This is going to be a 2-lesson task, though. I'm going to also add a budget tool. I'm going to say the budget, and here, and I'll say, please complete the budget. And again, we will ask that this one be completed in the academic year. Now, just some other options in terms of tasks. What I like to do often, especially if we're working virtually with students, is that in addition to having them do the interest profiler, think about what the class discussion would be. I mean, if kids are working from home over the next weeks or months, you're going to want them to think about the exercises that they're doing, not just do them. So you might potentially add in a task here that's a text reflection, reflection on the budget and interest exercise. And I might say, write 3 paragraphs about how you felt doing these self-assessments. Again, this is not a great lesson, so please hold back your critique. It's really just to show you how to do it. All right. Now you can put in a minimum word requirement, so make sure to say you've got to write over 250 words, but no more than 1,000. All right, fine. Whatever it is, and then we click. And actually, I'm going to reduce this just so you have a chance to actually finish and submit it. And I'll save the task. Okay, so now our lesson is a 3-task lesson. We're asking students to do the interest profiler, the budget tool, and the written reflection. All right, and so now we are all set. We have created our first lesson together inside of the CareerExplorer CareerZone, and it's ready to be assigned. And we called it, webinar introductory lesson. All right, so that's what we're gonna use. So let's go back to our users, and here they are, all 26 of them. And let's assign them that lesson. We are going to click Assign a Lesson, and we're going to find the one we just created, which is that one. If I click on the link, you'll see we can learn a little bit more about it. Oh, yep, that's the one. In this lesson, we're trying to introduce the CareerZone and CareerExplorer. Yep, that's the one I want to assign. I click Assign this lesson. It asks me to confirm that I want to assign it. I click OK, and it should be off. Okay, so it's congratulations, it's been assigned. We are all set. That's gone out to all of our students. I click Close. All right, and now we're waiting. Okay, because now all the students have received it. So the question is, what's the experience for the student? What are they going to see? let's go back to this student, Jacqueline. And I'm going to copy her username here, and I'm going to log out of my teacher account, my demo teacher account, and log in to my demo student account. All right. Now we're in Jacqueline's student account. Now this is the first time Jacqueline has logged into the new interface, so she's seeing some on-screen tutorials about what's going on. Great, click finish, and here we are. We're inside of Jacqueline's Career Hub. Now you're noticing everybody's homepage is a little bit different. For one thing, it has a different name because it's a different user, but it also, inside of Jacqueline's stuff, you have all of her most recent activity that she's done in the system. If she had ever done a budget, she has access to that. She did it way back in 2017. If she wants to do other activities, she can click the I want to button. And this has links to all the other activities she can do inside of the system. All right, so this is very much customized to her. The other thing here is that if she wants to put in an educator code, she can do that right in this box. As we mentioned before, if she wanted to come under the management of another teacher, she could. I know that's a question a lot of you sometimes have is, can a student be under the management of more than one teacher? And the answer is absolutely yes. They just would put in the unique educator code for that student, for that teacher in that box and click request, and they would come under management there. Because we're in the upgrade, you do see a disk next to the I want to. That means that she can save files to her Career Hub as well. The other thing she can do, by the way, is drag and drop files over this area, and it'll automatically go into her Career Hub. So again, one of the nice things with the upgrade is that students are able to save files. You're able to save files on their behalf. Now, do you remember when we sent Jacqueline a message? We sent her a quick message. You see up in the upper right that she has 2 unread messages in her inbox. She clicks there. And for one thing, we have a new assignment. That's what we assigned. And we also have that message that we sent her before, which was please complete your budget. That's all. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to. And then send the message. All right. And so now she's replied. And now we also have this message which says we have a new lesson that's been assigned to us. Okay. And if we want to take a look at what that is, we can. Okay. And by opening the webinar introductory lessons. So there are a couple of ways to get to the lesson that's been assigned. Let's go back though to our homepage and show you also that you have a card that shows up for the lesson as well. So if I click on webinar introductory lesson, you'll see that there has been an interest profiler completed, right? But it requires one to be taken in this academic year because we click that box. So we're going to take a new interest profiler, and we're going to start it by clicking go. And we're going to, it's going to save the old interest profiler. So don't worry that it gets overwritten. We have the history recorded, but we're going to, create a new one. We're going to do the 30 question mini together. So now we're in here, we're going through, and if you've never seen an interest profiler, these are really great exercises for students. There is a 30 question option and a 60 question option. Students might have a little more time on their hands these days, so 60 questions is okay. But if you were rushed and you're in class, we would recommend the 30 question because 30 questions can be done inside of a class period with discussion. Relatively safely in terms of the amount of time it takes. 60 is pushing it, and you might have some students who don't actually complete the interest profiler in the time allotted. So 30 is a good one if you're in class, but if you're doing the virtual thing, then 60 questions might be better. So you'll see that what is happening here is this is a self-assessment pulled directly from ONET, though we've done some refacing of the interface. And it asks questions like, basically it presents tasks and it has the students respond to the task and say, is this something I'd like to do? Right now, let's all develop some new medicines. Write books or plays. Yeah, cool, that's good. Teach an exercise routine. Interesting. Buy and sell stocks or bonds. Not for me, right? So this is how the student's going to do this as they're going through. They're going to look at these tasks. They're going to think about it and how much would be something they would potentially want to do. As they go through, they might decide, okay, this looks great or this doesn't look great. If you're in a classroom setting, just be wary of the fact that you don't want students to answer because they think their buddies would think it wasn't cool or whatever. They should answer truly for themselves, and think about these things because it isn't always super obvious to the student that they might like it or might not like it. So they should think about it a little bit. So anyway, I'm going through here. I'm probably confusing the system because I'm clicking things mostly at random. um, but in the end, what's going to happen, and the real beauty of the way the self-assessments work in the CareerZone and CareerExplorer, is I'm going to get a result that matches to Holland code attributes. And for instance, it says here that I'm investigative, realistic, and conventional. And I can learn about what those things are by hovering over. As I read through and learn a little bit more about what those are, that's fine. But I want to know, well, what occupations do I get matched to based on my self-assessment? And here we are. We're looking at the occupations, and we have a medical and clinical lab technician. All right, interesting. That's neat. Computer user support, nuclear medicine technologist. Well, I'm going to take a look at 3 of these medical-oriented ones, and I want to compare them. I haven't really heard of these occupations as a student, so I want to take a look and see what's going on. As I scroll down here, you're going to see the job zones listed, the career clusters that they're in, the interests that they align to, work values. We haven't really covered that yet, but the work importance profiler is where students are going to get results on their work values, what might matter to them about the world of work. How are they motivated? Do they like to work on their own, or do they rather be a part of the team? Or do they rather be creative, or do they rather be kind of assigned tasks? Everybody has different work values, and that's what that's suggesting. Salary, projected employment, and possible college majors. Well, this is interesting. So I've got the highest projected employment, a decent salary here, all this in computer user support specialist. That's pretty neat. But I don't really want to work in computers. I want to stay in the medical field. So I'm actually going to look between the two of being a phlebotomist or a medical and clinical lab technician. I'm going to look at the lab technician. Click view occupation, and now I'm inside of an occupation profile. I wanted to show you this flow because, again, when you're developing your lesson, you should know how this flows and how the student uses this. A student is going to do the assessment. They're going to look at occupations. They're probably going to compare occupations, and then they're going to start going deep into an individual occupation. All of this is potential fodder for a lesson that you might create, especially if you're thinking about a written reflection, right? You could say, compare 3 occupations. What makes you like one over the other 2? And then when you look at the one, what are some of the features that you didn't know about that you know about now? What are some, and you could quiz them on, what are some similar occupations? And because they all show up inside of the profile. So you're going to want to do this flow yourself so that you have some fodder for the kind of questions you might ask in written reflection tasks inside of your lesson. As you look at an occupation profile, know that you can compare states. You can put 2 side by side. In this case, we have California and Delaware, just to see what the average salary are in those 2 places. I can give it a rating. I can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. A thumbs up tells the system, hey, this is a pretty cool occupation for me, and if you don't mind, suggest some other ones that are similar to this, when I come back. And that's what the system will do. And then if I want to look at opportunities, I can do that as well. I can look at education and training, certifications that are available, jobs eventually, as I come back to it later on in life. And then companies is an area for what we call local opportunities, which is something for our subscribers where they can actually populate their system with local work-based learning opportunities, or opportunities from community organizations, et cetera, that they want to promote inside of their system. So we'll probably cover that in more depth in another call, but I just want you to know that that's what that companies tab is. All right, so we've done the self-assessment, which is great. The interest profiler is done, and we've reviewed some things. Now, we didn't do our written reflection just yet. But let's go back to our introductory lesson, and let's go to the budget. Again, we've done a budget, but let's create a new one because we have to in our new academic year, and also because we want to make sure all of you know how this works. In the budget tool, I'm going to budget how much money I need. I'm going to pick a county. And what you're going to see when students do this budget tool is they are going to be able to go through kind of a line item approach to creating a budget. And the lifestyle budget is very eye opening for a lot of kids because they don't really think about these things and the financial implications in terms of, if I decide to live with parents, family, or friends, what the monthly costs are compared to, say, owning a place that's already paid for or buying a place of my own, or renting an apartment, right? Something all of you should know is cost of living is fluctuates, and while this is pulled in from federal data sources, sometimes it lags. So you might change a monthly cost just by going in the green section and typing in the correct number, and you're able to do that. And you could actually make that part of this activity, to have students, make sure that they enter accurate monthly costs and tell them how to do that. In this next one, they're talking about utilities, which ones they're going to select. And I'm gonna move through this one as quickly as I move through the other one, just to give you an idea of how the outputs look for the student. Okay, and again, I'm going pretty randomly here, but we are going to wrap this up with 5% savings. And all right, so now we've got a monthly spending amount. So what this budget does is this gives me a line by line itemized budget, tells me my monthly spending, including taxes, right? Tells me how much I would need to make. I need to make at least about $33,000. But I might have forgotten some things. Okay, so for one thing, this is a start, but it may not be everything that would be in my budget. So I can click add other items, add a new expense, and let's use an example. We'll say pet, and we'll say a pet costs $75 a month. Click save, and now that gets added to the budget. Okay, so that's just a way that you can, add to your budget or add new items that might have been missed, and that can be a great activity for students because as they go through these things, see if they can figure out a category or something that would be in a budget that wasn't actually listed here. All right, so now that we've done that, we can view the occupations that meet my minimum salary requirements. And this is gonna be a very comprehensive list. The only thing that's really changed is that the salary filter is now set to a minimum of about $33,000. And so you see now a piggy bank next to every occupation that meets that minimum salary requirement. All right, so we've done the budget tool, we've done the interest profiler, and we are just about done with our lesson, except we haven't written our written reflection. Okay, we have done our interest profiler and budget tool, but we haven't done the reflection. So this was write 3 paragraphs about how you felt doing these self-assessments. I set my minimum words very sneakily there to 10. So I'd say, it was a lot of fun to do the self-assessments. I learned a lot. Okay, so that's 14 words. All right, so in theory, I've met the minimum allotment. You could see that this little green bar was going, it would go all the way to the end if I wrote 1,000 words. We don't have time for that. I'm gonna save and show summary. And I've now completed my lesson as a student. I did my interest profiler, my budget tool, my reflection, and I'm gonna click submit assignment. All right, and now it's been sent back to my teacher. Okay, so I'm gonna log out of Jacqueline, the student, and we are gonna log back into our teacher. All right, and so now we're back in just our educator's account. And what we wanna do now is we wanna figure out, okay, we assigned this lesson, it's now the end of the week, who's actually done the lesson? What's going on? So very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to manage users, and I am going to run a report. And the report I'm going to run is called the assignment status report. I'm going to select the lesson that I want to do, which was webinar introductory lesson. And I can see here that I've assigned it 26 times to all 26 of my students. It's been completed once, and I haven't approved any of the lessons yet. I'm going to show that in a moment. As I go down, I can see at a glance who is where in their completion of the assignment, okay? And I can see that Jacqueline, my student who just completed it on this webinar, she's all done. And if I want, I can open up her name and I can actually scroll down and see her lesson this way. All right, so this will give me the results of her interest profile or her budget tool, her actual self-reflection. So that's one way that I can take a look at that if I want to. So this gives you a way to at a glance know how many of your students have actually completed the lesson. Just note though that they have to have submitted the lesson for it to show as completed. That last button I clicked, right? So you're going to want to make sure that they click submit lesson at the end, because that's going to be the way that the system verifies that, hey, all right, like was the interest profiler done this academic year, or is it only showing this progress because it was done say 3 years ago or something like that? So make sure they submit that. Now let's get to this question about approval. One thing that is, feature that you can take advantage of is if you go to lessons, there is something called an approve queue. And if I open the approve queue, I can see my webinar introductory lesson. And I can see I have one lesson that's been submitted to me for my approval. Think of this as almost like a grade book, all right? So if I had multiple teachers who had submitted this, I would go through and I could actually click the little icon there and see all the submissions that came in. Oops, I didn't mean to close that out. But in this case, I'm just looking at the one from Jacqueline because that's the one we did together. I scroll through, everything looks great. If I want, I can save the approved PDF to the user's files. I could add a tag to it if I wanted to run a report on that, but I don't need to. I'm just gonna click approve. All right, so now I have approved Jacqueline's assignment. And in theory, I would be doing these as they came in. All right, and now if I went back to users and went back to my assignment status report, then I would be able to go to webinar introductory lesson, and we'll see now that I've one completed and one approved. So if I went in there and I saw 10 completed but only one approved, then I know I should jump to my approval queue and review the lessons. The only thing that's a little quirky that I just want to make sure you remember is the approve queue is actually inside the lessons button. You click lessons and that's where you're going to find the approval queue. All right, if you want to run the report, that's under run a report under manage users. You click assignment status report, you find your lesson that you assigned, oops, and that pulls up that for you, okay? All right, so we've covered quite a bit. We're about 45 minutes into the call, but what I really want to make sure everyone knew how to do was how to create these lessons, how to assign them, what the experience is like for the student as they go through it, and then when the student finishes, they submit it to you. You're able to run a report to see, who's submitted, who hasn't, who's completed, who hasn't, and then also you can approve. So we've covered all of those things in this short amount of time. From a lesson planning point of view, plus giving you some kind of overview of the system itself. But I wanted to make sure in this webinar that we were very focused on lesson creation. For one thing, because it's a really great feature of the system, it allows you to really curate the way through the system that you decide is most important. Every educator has a different approach to using the system, and the system has a lot of stuff in it. There are a number of self-assessments. There's a number of things they can look at inside of Explore Pathways. Even in those top tabs under Explore, Decide, and Grow, you're going to see even more features that you could potentially use and leverage and reference in a lesson plan. Okay, so a lesson plan is a really great way to standardize the way your students move through the system. And ultimately, we talk about career planning, you can use a lesson as your way to sort of curate the elements of a great career plan as well. It's a very flexible system. All right, so you can kind of tell students, well, these are the elements of a great career plan. For one is that you begin with this process of self-understanding. 2 is that you're going to begin to look and explore careers. 3 is you're going to start to understand what educational pathways are required to achieve those careers. And then 4, you're going to start to actually begin to make some decisions. And maybe if you're, have access to work-based learning, start to think about getting on-the-job training. One of the nice things too that is inside of the system is within our job search under Decide, if you click job search, you can look not just at job openings, but you can look at apprenticeships and internships. That's something that students can do. So even if you're not part of the upgrade, where you're populating your own work-based learning opportunities, these are available to the student. One other kind of pro tip is for students and for educators, use the search box. This is a really helpful way to just, if you need to very quickly find, a college profile or an occupation profile, this can be a really nice way to do it. If you have a student who says, I'm interested in becoming a police officer, well, they might type in police and find out that within that particular keyword set, there's 21 occupations that could be a match and that they might want to explore. So the search bar is a really nice thing to think about. All right, before we get to questions, I want to make sure that I have a chance to review sort of our options for all of you in terms of pricing and uh, upgrades. So like I said, students who log into this system are going to find that they can create an account for free. They're going to have that account for free for life. All right, so that's the Headed2 account that we see. And I went to, by the way, the URL I just typed in was headed2.com/pricing. All right, so first things first, creation of an account is free, and that's always going to be the case. All right, so we want everyone to create an account. And then if you're an educator, all right, you're going to be given the option to create a free educator account. Again, there's nothing you have to pay for there, and you get to have 50 students under management. If you want to bring in more than 50 students under your individual educator account, you can do that. And you can get something called a premium educator account. And with that, you can manage up to 175 students. You do get access to the preloaded lesson plans. You get access to the file storage. So students can save and store files. You can do it on their behalf there as well. And you'll be able to also create enhanced lesson plans where you attach things like videos or ask students to submit work. So that's a great option if you're an individual educator who just wants more out of the system. The price is $89 per academic year. One important thing we want to point out to all of you, today is that if you purchase a premium educator account now, you will have it for the remainder of this academic year and all of next academic year. Okay, so even though it's academic year pricing, you're going to get the rest of this academic year essentially for free, and you're really paying for the next academic year. So just something to consider as you're making your plans. Now, we have options for multiple educators. So this is where, say you're a CTE program, or say you're a whole school or district that wants to create an upgraded version of the CareerZone or CareerExplorer, you can do that. These options are under the multiple educators tab under pricing, and you can see some of what you would get. Now, the big pieces of the upgrader that you get a unique URL. The students are able to sign in with Google or Clever or MS365, so there's a single sign-on capability. We actually have the ability in some of our states to sync with your SIS, so that's something you can ask us about provided we have enough students inside the system. And the other really nice thing about the upgrade is that you can bring in those local opportunities for work-based learning. So that can definitely be something that you consider. All right, so that's just a little bit of an overview of our upgrade options. But if you have any questions about the upgrades or you're wondering about it, you can email us at sales@headed2.com, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. But it's not absolutely necessary that you upgrade anything. Right now, the number one thing, if you haven't already, is sign in, create an account, and if you're an educator, create that free educator account. All right. So I think that's all I really want to cover in the presentation portion. We'll use the last 10 minutes here to try to cover as much of the Q&A as we can. Dave, I know you were kind of looking at the Q&A as we were going, so I'm wondering if you might be able to tell me some of the questions that are on there.
So I'm actually not seeing anything, Blair. I don't know if that has to do with my permissions for the meeting or not.
That could very well be the case. So just give me a moment, guys, and I'll see if I can take a look at these. So, all right. Okay, so there's some questions about, what if you don't work for a K-12 school? What we encourage you to do is still create an account. Go in and you can still submit for a free educator account. These are obviously pretty special and difficult times for everyone, so we're not trying to limit anyone in that regard. As far as, and I'm sorry that the screen share is paused, but I'm just looking at these questions. As far as curriculum standards and use of the California Career Zone in particular, I have a question about that. It's a very widely used system in the state of California. And it's been in the state for over 15 years. Actually, California Career Zone is where this all started, actually, for all of you joining us nationally. The California Career Zone was started in partnership with the Department of Education 15 years ago. So, and it's used and has been used in over 90% of the districts statewide. So very widely used. In terms of the use for different ages, one thing we didn't have a chance to cover, and we will cover in a future webinar, is up the ladder for younger students. So for grades all the way up to grade 5, it's a sort of a different look and feel to the interface, where students would go into the up the ladder, which is basically a game, a gamified version of CareerExplorer, and a totally different look and feel. And even with lessons there, it's less applicable because you don't need to create a lesson. It's a self-guided game, whereas they get promoted inside of the game, they complete different activities, they generate evidence if you're in Pennsylvania, et cetera. So we'll cover that in a future webinar. As far as getting messages to students, the messages all happen inside of the Career Zone or CareerExplorer. It can link up to their email and they can get notified that they have it, but that's optional for them if they link it up to an actual external email address. There was a question about Spanish language, and yes, there is a Spanish language toggle for the system. I'm going to show you in the California Career Zone, for instance. We have a language toggle at the very bottom, and you can switch the whole system to Spanish. Okay. We have, in terms of, there's questions about profiles. There's well over 1,000 total profiles in the system. And if you do a search, you'll be able to, on our, within our own search bar for colleges, you'll be able to see how many are listed there. You can have multiple educators for individual students, but the educator code itself is never shared. Every teacher has his or her own educator code. Though what you can do is, if you are in the upgrade, you can have multiple educators see the same, lesson reports, etc. But if you're in the free version, you're only going to be able to see the lessons and reports for your own kids, not for other kids. All right, I think that's basically what I'm going to be able to cover. I will try to follow up with some of these Q&A questions over email, because I wasn't able to get to all of them. There are a bunch there, and I just tried to do sort of as much of a scan as I possibly could. But I will do my best to reply to everyone via email. Though, if you have any any questions you'd like to ask me directly, again, my name is Blair Dore, D-O-R-E, and my email is blair@headed2.com, and I'm very happy to help any of you get started with the Career Zone or CareerExplorer, answer questions about access, any concerns you may have. We're really here to help you and hopefully make this aspect of your virtual learning experience over the next weeks and months easier. This, as I said at the top, is a really nice way to get students out of thinking of all the challenges that we're facing and into thinking about the future, which will be here before we know it, and we'll all be out of this before we know it. And we're gonna have to get back to our big plans for our lives as kids and as educators. And this is a really nice way to get everyone forward thinking. So please consider using it. Consider using the lesson plan mechanism as a way to kind of develop a way through the system that you think is the right approach. And like I said, if you have questions, you can circle back to me, Blair@headed2.com. Again, if you want to look at the pricing and upgrade options, you will find those on our websites, headed2.com/pricing. And you can also email me, and I'll also send some information and follow up to all of you about what we covered today, as well as different options going forward. So with that, I am going to wrap up today's webinar. About 3 minutes before the hour. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to attend this. during such a stressful and difficult time. If you or any of your colleagues were not able to catch this in its entirety, we will be sending out a recording. So we'll pull the recording together hopefully today and get that out to everyone who registered. Again, thank you and have a wonderful day.